And hello, everybody. I am Robert Adducci, and I am here with Brian Reeves and Leamon Crafton. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello, everybody.
And we are here to talk about the common threats of Tharkold. Part of the the crowdfunding that we're doing is that we're doing some of these streams to just kind of give you guys some more information and to kind of get you guys excited about what we're doing with Tharkold. So Brian has let me get back to that. Brian has written, has been part of every mega adventure for Torg Eternity, starting with Fires of Ra. He wrote many of the archetypes and has two Delphi adventures in Cyberpapacy and Tharkold. So, welcome, Brian. How did you first start playing Torg?
Well, I think like a lot of people of my age, I guess I started when Torg first came out. The week it came out, it was just, well, there was a really amazing ad campaign that ran in Dragon magazine for a few months prior to that, and it had really got us going. So when that box set came out in 1990, I was right there, and I bought it, read the whole thing on a train ride, and was running a game of it that basically the next day. And we ran a campaign that ran about 10 years, almost 10 years of Torg, back all through the 90s. It
Nice.
was a lot of fun. Mm-hmm.
Nice. And Leamon Crafton wrote Act 4 in Relics of Power Redux, the act set in Tharkold, as well as To the Axe and Blood in the Blasted Lands, which is the Tharkold mega adventure. And he's wrote some in the Tharkold source book as well. So welcome, Leamon. And how did you get involved with Torg?
It was in college back, like probably '92. I was a little late by a couple of years. I was a player. The only time I've actually played Torg. After that semester, I switched colleges. I actually found the box set, and then I became the game master and have been game mastering ever since. And was really happy with the new version. So.
Cool. So we've got some folks in chat. So welcome, chat. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in chat, and we'll get to them as we move along. Let's see. He says, "Hope we hit that next stretch goal, the next psionic goal tonight." Is there another one? Yeah. Well, let's go take a look at those real quick. So, the next goals are, where are we at here? I was looking at the update.
I haven't looked at them yet today.
What's that?
I haven't looked at them yet today. I'm not sure what.
So right now we've had 531 backers, and we are at $115,000. So we're about 4,000 before unlocking the next level up.
Sweet.
Let me scroll way down here to see what that is. So the next one looks like the Tharkold. Oh, the psionic cards, right? So we just unlocked with 110,000 the core Earth psionics, and now we're working on the psionic cards at 120,000.
Wow.
Yes.
So let's talk about the common threats of Tharkold. So in our prior Q&A, we talked about kind of the major threats, the Jezreels, the Thrashens, and so on. So what are some of the minor threats that really stick out in your mind that Jezreel or Thrashen might throw at some of the player characters? How about you, Brian?
Oh, well, there are quite a number of them, and having just finished putting together a threat section for at the end of Blood on the Blasted Lands, a lot of them are very fresh in my memory. One thing that I saw a lot of, at least in the first part of the adventure, are a lot of marauders and mutated raiders and those sorts of Blasted Lands characters, wastelanders. And then as we move farther southwest, I guess, during the adventure, you start encountering more things like soldiers are in there. We do have some more humans, but you also run into some weird creatures, necros, which are these like flying birds that with like sharp beaks and stuff. Yeah.
And how about you, Leamon?
I think my favorite threat, if you want to call it that, is the winter.
Mm.
I always every time somebody's like Tharkold, I'm like, okay, what time of the year? And they're like, oh, December, January, and I'm like, you got to do the winter because that's
Nice,
gonna
yeah.
mess up with people. Um, I see it as everybody understands Russian winter. They think the World War II, Napoleon, all of that. But also you have Tharkold with the law of pain. So I personally have been in February in Russia, and
Hmm.
my eyes froze open,
Oh my God.
and it was painful. So I like always try to bring that back into my head and go, okay, now if this was compounded by the law of pain, how bad this would be. So
Nice.
I do a lot of environmental threats. Tharkold also has the hot spots from when the nuke hit Moscow, and then radiation spread up north and east. So a lot of the environmental things can be threats, and then they make threats like the hotspots. The radiation gives you mutations, abominations, and things like that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, we had to
Yeah.
make sure that we put in a little bit of expanded information about running an adventure during winter. If GMs are interested in making that a factor, it could definitely be an important factor. So, Torg Eternity has some rules for cold weather, but we felt like it was a good idea to go a little deeper into it. Like, what happens if you fall into frigid water, near freezing water? That sort of thing. So there is a sidebar for that to help out with that. Mhm.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's something that that sometimes we forget about while we're playing because we're so focused on like the kind of NPC threats and things like that. So I think having the environmental threats are definitely something to think about. Yeah. So
Mhm.
let's see. Prince Earwig asked, yeah, like what's your favorite foe from Tharkold? So not counting the big ones. What's one of your favorites?
Um, well, I'm torn really. Tharkold has a foot in two, maybe even three different kinds of properties that sort of ideas, I guess that I really love. I love Mad Max, and so I was really excited when Blood on the sorry when the Blasted Lands sort of came out when they redid Torg Eternity, and it has like a little bit of Mad Max Fury Road going on in there. I love that kind of stuff. So I was particularly fond of the Marauders and the Wastelanders, but I also used to be a huge fan of Hellraiser, and so bringing in some of old Tharkold, like the older creatures that showed up in Creatures of Tharkold back in Otorg,
Hmm.
I brought in some of those for this adventure, and that are a little bit more like I don't know what you would say, but a little bit more Clive Barker-ish, right? So some of those are I really enjoyed bringing back in. I don't want to spoil anything, but uh, um, I also really like the Chain Wolves. To be honest, that was something that has come up as a new creature. It's not in the original Torg Eternity at the end in the threat section. And they show up a couple different times in this adventure, and they're pretty interesting and kind of creepy.
Nice,
Mhm.
yeah. So John mentioned those the other day as well. And if people are watching the stream right now, we've got a bunch of the art that's rolling through, and you'll definitely see a picture of those chain wolves. They're pretty cool.
Yeah, that was a great picture.
How about you, Leamon? What's some of your favorites?
It won't quite spoil anything because you do, I think, have the little slideshow of the pictures at the bottom, but the Saigon is one of my favorite.
Mm.
It was from the old Creatures of Tharkold. Basically, what happens when the magic level of Tharkold keeps going down, you have dragons. They're not going to exist, so they use occult tech to keep themselves alive. So they have that, cyber occult tech cyberware type thing with
Oh,
the
nice.
the the dragon. I wanted to include one in Relics of Power, but there was a reason I couldn't. So then, when I came into the other one, I was able to slip that in, and that picture is just wonderful. I love that picture.
Awesome. Let's see. Galvin asked. This kind of goes in a little different direction, but it is interesting. How much of what we know does the Delphi Council actually know? It's like, do they know about darkness devices? And if so, do they know what the individual or individual devices are?
Hmm. If I feel like Daryl or Deanna would have a much better idea, but I feel like they probably do. They have some knowledge about that sort of thing. I think. Do you want to say something about that? It seems to me like they would. Maybe not all the specifics, but they know enough. They probably know a lot more than they did during original Torg, right, where everybody was still trying to figure things out. Mm-hmm.
I kind of have the same thought on that. Probably with Quinn, Sebastian might know something, but that's how much he knows, how in depth, I'm not sure on the specifics.
Yeah, I think that's the main key, is that Quinn Sebastian is here, and he learned a lot during the previous, possibility war. And so he's been able to bring some of that knowledge forward and provide it to the Delphi Council. So they know a lot more than they probably would otherwise in this version of the war.
All right. Let's see. PK Levine. So, folks, I saw that you guys said that I had a low volume, so let me know how that is. I turned it up a little bit, so let me know if that's any better. PK Levine asked, what sort of psionic-focused threats are we going to see?
Good question. Leamon, you want to start?
Yes. In Relics, and actually both adventures, there are different psychic beings. I see a lot of it as kind of what ghosts might be, psychic emanations that happen with massive pain and other Tharkold world laws taking place, sticking around, and kind of in certain cases being able to take form and want to take out their vengeance and the pain that they're feeling onto others. So there's a few type of not spiritual or not magic, but kind of psychic ghostly emanations that appear.
Yeah.
Let's see. We've got Prince Erig asks, we have a Wonder Dog in Nile Empire. Will we get an Occultech baboon template?
No, there aren't any of those, but there are definitely some dangerous animals that show up that have been modified, I guess you could say, by Tharkold. Sometimes with Occultech, sometimes not. You won't see anything like Kolo from Fires of Ra. That was the silverback gorilla that had pincers for hands and a brain case and stuff. You don't see anything exactly like that, at least not in this adventure. But that picture of all the what was it called, the Dark Menagerie or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It looks like there's going to be some stuff going on there with some Occultech creatures. Yes.
Let's see. Michael Roderick asks, with the Tharkold Isle mix zone, have you found any ways to mix on creature creations, maybe Aelish creatures with Occultech?
Oh man, that would be fantastic. In the previous adventure, Unhallowed Data, we do go into a cyber papacy Isle mix zone around Calais, the city of Calais in France. I guess it's not too much of a spoiler to say we didn't do that this time, but I think there are wonderful opportunities for those mixed zones. I can't even begin to imagine what it would look like or be like to be in a place like that. But I think it would be a lot worse than Calais, for sure. I would love to see it.
There actually, in Relics of Power, is one that shows up. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but it is published, and it also was from the 1990s series Relics of Power. So if you don't want to spoil it, you might want to pause or put your fingers in your ear. In Torg Eternity, we have Lance, who I
yes.
took as he was a clanker from Isle, and when I was coming up with that version, and he went into the mix zone and was by a Tharkold was dominated. Clankers have that control type mechanism, so it kind of played a little neat into the act of Relics of Power. But yes, it's sort of been in a few things there.
Yeah, that was a great character. I love that. It was kind of a Torg Eternity reimagining of an old original Torg character who I feel like we used him better in this version than they did in the previous one. But it was very fascinating. I love that kind of thing when you have a creature, not just a person, but like an actual creature or something from this reality who gets transformed to that one, and just to see how that blend really turns out. It's really amazing. That's one of the best things about Torg, honestly. Yeah.
Nice. Michael asks, you've talked about creatures and environment. Are there any sort of technological threats?
Technological threats such as, well,
the synth cyclers.
Synth cyclers. The old creatures of Tharkold had synth cyclers, but they were more automated. This time they have pilots.
That's right.
But they are a dangerous. What would you describe it as? It's heavy machinery that's intended to recycle materials so that they can reuse them elsewhere. But they can also recycle organic materials such as living or dead creatures. So they don't just go about cutting about cars and things like that. They might also come after you. We also do have, there are some, one of my favorites are the Daigon bogies. They are a flying sphere, metallic spheres, a little bit, maybe about the size of a basketball, perhaps. Inspired very heavily off the flying spheres from Phantasm, the old Phantasm movies. And these things are a serious threat. When one of them's coming after you, they're sort of like autonomous drones. They don't need a drone pilot, and they can put the hurt on you. Another really good technological threat, honestly, is the entire grid, Kur. And there is a part in this adventure where you do need to go into Kur, and it is not a good place to go at all. It'll make you, I mean, it'll definitely make you miss the cyber papacy,
So what?
It'll make you miss the GodNet. The GodNet looks like nothing compared to this. It's
So I heard them talking about a little bit about this. So can you explain a little bit about that for me and for other people that maybe are not familiar with what this is?
Yeah. So we wanted to do something a little bit different with the grid, aka Kur. Kur, I don't know how you pronounce it. It's Kur. It's sort of it's almost like it's more of an alternate dimension than it is a computer network. You go into it kind of in the same way you would go into the network in the Matrix. Right? You have to kind of physically jack in, and it's an agonizing process. And inside there, it's the imagery is very similar to the underworld as depicted in the Hellraiser movies. It's a giant labyrinth. There are dark delights and terrible creatures that dwell inside there, and that's also where the techno demons like to hide or store or make a record of all their conquests, their deeds and misdeeds, or just their secrets, whatever they want to put in there. So it's not your typical computer network, but it can function as an information storage facility, I guess you could say, that is it's virtual, but maybe it's more than virtual. It might also be, it's quite possible that it's actually another dimension, and it might also be, some people think it might be where the techno demons originally came from. That information nobody knows for sure, but it is it's more than just hacking into some computers. You actually have to wander through a terrifying labyrinth to find what you're looking for.
That sounds fun.
I love it.
Nice. So this is from all the ampersands, not a question, but to Leamon, if you're the one who put that Roll20 Torg Eternity tutorial together on YouTube, thank you for that. I learned a few things that have really helped in running my game. So awesome.
Yes, that was me.
Awesome. So if anybody is in the chat can find that and wants to link that in the chat, that'd be great. Galvin says both the Isle and Cyber Papacy timelines mentioned Tharkold settling in the mix zone in the English Channel on day 135. Will this be expanded upon in the Tharkold book at all?
I don't think I can answer that question. I'm not sure. I don't think that it is.
It's just sort of like a side note, yeah.
Yeah. Nothing that I've seen, but then again, I haven't looked at the source book. I've been working on doing layout and stuff, and I haven't looked at the new version of the source book in a few weeks. So there might be something there. Mm-hmm.
Okay. They also ask, nanotech and UltraCAD were a big thing in some original Torg Tharkold tech. Do they make a reappearance, or are they replaced by something else? 3D printing has moved on quite a ways since the mid-90s.
Yes. The synth cyclers are linked to that. The synth cyclers are essentially gathering materials. There are UltraCAD blocks that can be shaped and modified to make new things. We do have a couple of creatures that kind of make use of. There's an old creature from Creatures of Tharkold that I really loved, and it was so evil that I always felt really bad bringing it into a game. These things called Thin Widows that would lay a single or a few strands of monofilament wire, excuse me, like across a door. And when you walk through the door, it basically just slices you into pieces, like in the movie Cube or something, right? And then they scuttle out and just sort of have a feast, right? Those things were so gnarly, but they're so perfect for Tharkold. So I had to figure out a way of getting those in here. So yeah, Storm Knights, watch out.
Tharkold, the place that they go to die.
Yeah.
All right. So looking at the at one of the updates, there's a question from Coral Blue. Actually, a bunch of them. Let's see. Will there be aspirant villains being only mundanely villainous, or does any villainous one no longer considered as an aspirant and treated as a regular techno demon?
If I'm following the question, it's asking whether or not there would be somebody, a villain in here who was formerly an aspirant who has gone back to villainy.
Well, I think it's like, if you have an aspirant who's a villain, can they still be an aspirant, or would they just be considered a regular techno demon at that time?
No, not from my understanding. I think an aspirant is somebody who's trying to turn their back on their supernaturally evil origin. They're trying to overcome it. So I don't think you could be aspirant and also be evil, because you would just, because you're just embracing evil, right? Which is against what the aspirants are trying to do.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's see. PK Levine asks, one threat that's more subtle, maybe are the Russian mafioso Bratva. Is there going to be anything cool done with them?
Go ahead, Leamon.
There's, I believe in the source book mainly, there's a little bit of the Bratva. I don't think so much in the adventure, but it's one of those things that there's different levels, and I think in one of the previous question and answers, they're everything from the really sophisticated, organization, and then kind of the lower, just a few thugs get together and decide that they want to be Bratva, wannabes type thing. So there is that whole range, but I think it's more discussed loosely in the source book than specific things given. But that doesn't mean that in the future, or maybe in one of the Delphi missions, there might be something.
Yeah, it was fun hearing you pronounce that, actually. Yeah, they're not in the adventure. Closest we come are gang members, but there is an archetype that taps into that a little bit. Yeah. I mean, it's a ripe opportunity for expansion. It's one of those situations where you have 100 ideas and there's room for 70, you know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Coral Blue asks, will there be any rules or guidelines to create non-human, usually animal abominations as an appropriate threat, other than just leaving it to the GM's whim?
Again, I don't think so. Which kind of gets to an interesting question about how you put together threats.
Let's talk about that.
How you stat up these creatures, right?
Mm-hmm.
Back in the days of D20, when D20 was just exploding, third edition D&D, for about 10 years, I remember a lot of my players would have this attitude that I needed to use the same rules to put together all the enemies that that they use to put together their player characters. And I would actually have people come to me and say, why don't I have access to this ability or that spell? How come this evil wizard can do this and I can't? You know, and I'd say, well, this is your set of creation rules, and then basically anything goes really for villains. You know, make up stuff, right? If you don't make up stuff, if you only have this amount of stuff to work with, then there's going to be no surprises. Well, anyway, so our dominant attitude when creating threats in Torg Eternity, just aim for balance. What we know of to be balanced, but we don't have any construction. There's no like algorithm to run them through or bits and pieces to add on and stuff. There are some things in at the back in the threat section in Torg Eternity. There's some things like minion and there's size categories and things like that. There's a few things, but for the most part, we don't have any specific I don't know what checklist or build list or anything like that is to make them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so I don't think there's anything showing up for animals. I don't see any reason why you couldn't, but we don't have anything that I know of now.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's I totally agree. One of the things about third edition D&D was that just making monsters by the book was always a big pain, or even making NPCs by the book was always a big pain.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Systems that are much lighter that allow NPCs to be different than PCs seem to work better, at least from the GM side.
I think so too. Yeah, you ended up with weird stuff like minotaurs with 3 wizard levels and stuff like that, and instead of just doing what sounds right, you had to run it through like a system, and And I always just prefer to just eyeball it, wing it. Yeah, it works better.
Yeah,
so far,
what does
problems. If anything, they're underpowered sometimes.
It's kind of like, what cool thing would this threat have? Okay, and then it's like, is this too powerful? Then maybe limit it X many times per scene, or it only recharges on a setback, or something like that. Or sometimes it's just, I really like that power that threat over there has. I'm going to snag that and work it. So the more threats that are made, the more sources we have, but we don't limit ourselves to that. We can come up with things that we like.
Makes sense.
That's a good point. And it's very difficult. One of my favorite things to do when I'm writing these adventures is to bring in stuff that's not going to show up in the source book. That's like a one-time thing, like in Revenge of the Caradon, we had a four-armed demon, a woman who was running a thieves guild, right? She's not any kind of creature that you're ever going to see in the source book, but sometimes what I like to do also is I go into old creatures of Isle or whatever those old books were, and dig out some of those old creatures. And back then they didn't have any kind of system like we have now with special abilities. It was described in the creature description, and you just kind of had to figure it out. Maybe they gave it some spells or something like that, but a lot of times it's just like, they can do this, and it doesn't say how, and so you then have to, if you're going to bring it into Torg Eternity, have to figure out how you're going to codify that, right? So that's a bit of a challenge, but so far I think we've been pretty successful, I think.
Yeah. So it sounds like, and Grey March says this, I guess you could just like tack on mutations onto animal abominations and just kind of make whatever if you have animal stats, just add whatever special abilities and whatnot you need to them.
It seems like you could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Zinesider just said, you just spoiled the wing it secrets of RPG creation. Call the Cyberpapacy RPG police immediately. And PK Levine says, so going back to the grid, is grid and cur, are they synonyms for the same thing? Or a subset of one another?
From Leamon, you might have more information on that. From what I've seen, it seems like they're kind of synonymous. To my mind, the difference is Kur is almost like a place, but the grid is how you move information through it. And there are a lot of devices that are connected through it, almost like in a way that I don't know if I could possibly describe, but interactive maps, which showed up in the Torg Eternity rules under the gear section, they pull information through the grid without actually you having to go into it to get anything. So it can transmit information as well. And so usually when I'm talking about the grid, I think I'm using it more in that sense. But if you're actually plugging in to go in, you're going into Kur. You're not going into the grid. Although I think they could be used interchangeably. What do you think, Leamon?
I think from what I've read, it seems to be more of they're the same thing, that they're just now it has a name. Before it was just the grid. But I do kind of like your idea of the technology that connects it, and the data transmission can be kind of just grid and the actual place that you don't want to go. I mean, everybody's like, how do you go there? What perks are going to be there? And you don't understand. You don't want to go there.
Yeah, there was a thread over on the Piazza and I had to point out, people were saying you don't want to go there, and it isn't like the GodNet. It's not the kind of place you dip into to go switch off some cameras somewhere. I mean, I guess you can, but it is more involved to get in there, and it's harder to get back out, and it's much more likely that you're going to draw the attention of something you don't want the attention of. And in fact, even just using an interactive map, or anytime you're tapping into the grid in any way, you might possibly get the attention of something you don't want. So it's still a useful tool, but you definitely have to be more careful. I mean, even in the cyberpapacy, you have to be careful, but here you have to be even more careful.
Nice.
Yeah.
Omar says the grid transmits by courier demons. Nice.
Courier. Oh
courier,
my gosh.
Right, courier.
Got it.
Grey March asks, if your players played the Looks Like Trouble Cosm card to have hostiles head their way, what kind of threats would you choose on the fly? How about you, Leamon?
It would depend on where I was, because I think one of the interesting things in Tharkold is you do have, you have some places that are very civilized. Russia wasn't just completely destroyed. Volkov is the president of Russia. So you do have these cities that are trying to run as a city. If he goes and kills everybody, all of his citizens, he doesn't have any, population for himself. So if it's in a city, if it's a city, I might have some local police or what I call the Russian Tharkold forces. It's kind of the Russian army that has some Tharkold tech that they're trying to use. So they have social, 25 tactics. So they're, a little bit better in that. But if I'm out in the blasted land, I'm going to be throwing either wastelanders, Mad Max type things, abomination bears or the chain wolves, things like that. If they're in a destroyed city, like Jezreel's came or her forces, and they've wiped out the city, then I might have scavengers appear, or some twisted occult tech things.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Brian? Anything to add to that?
I agree with that. I think in a more in an area that's being held together a little bit better, perhaps you could have Cultec gangers or other kinds of gangs showing up, or even just some sort of security forces out in the blasted lands, where you're pretty much it's just a wild place where there's no authority and there's nobody looking out for anybody except for themselves, pretty much. It would be, it'd be very easy to run into all kinds of terrible creatures out there, ghouls, for example, or any kind of marauders. But there's also swarm rats and a bunch of other horrible things that they can run into out there. You can run into swarm rats and those kinds of things pretty much anywhere, but they're way more likely out in the blasted lands.
Nice. So speaking of the Blasted Lands, will there be vehicle threats for vehicular combat?
Oh yeah. And in fact, we've unlocked it was 100,000, I believe. We unlocked a playthrough of the first act,
Mm-hmm.
and that's one of the acts that I wrote. And again, I don't want to give anything away, but it's heavily Mad Max inspired.
Nice.
Especially towards the end. And Act 2 also, there's a picture of some, there's an illustration, I guess, of some cars battling it out on, looks like a track inside a stadium. Mm-hmm. That's in Act 2. Okay. So there's definitely some vehicular combat. It's mostly towards the beginning of the adventure, but mm-hmm. I had to get that in there. Nice. I love a good chase sequence. I absolutely love it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Let's see. They also ask, will there be any creatures that can also be used as animal companions or something similar, like a drone for PCs?
I don't know if I'd want. I'm trying to imagine how on earth you would tame a chain wolf. Good question. I don't see any reason why you couldn't, but that would definitely be a game master's call on that one, because an abomination bear is not the same thing as a regular old bear animal companion. So yeah, that one you'd have to work out, I think, at the table. But
The only one that I can think of is from Relics of Power. There is a Demorling. That is kind of a optional, depending on what people do, they might be able to get a companion, but that's the only one that I can directly recall.
Yeah, a grotesque, disturbing companion.
Yes.
It was gross, man.
Let's see. All the ampersands, back to talking about Grid and Kerr, says, you don't want to go there if you can help it, but it was mentioned that there's an archetype called Grid Runner. So if it's somewhere players can never go, why would it be mentioned?
Oh no, you can go. Mm-hmm. You can go.
It's just something probably nobody wants to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Makes sense.
Or you may be forced to go.
Right.
And more than ever, you need somebody who knows how to get in safely and navigate it safely and get out safely. So that's what the Grid Runner is all about. I mean, you have hackers and stuff in every. I'm sure we'll even have something similar to it in Pan Pacifica that's specific to their computer networks. But the Grid Runner is an essential worker, almost, almost like a black market kind of workers, underground, right, who can get you into this place and back out again safely. So the average citizen, unlike in cyber papacy, the average person doesn't just go home after work and plug in and have some fun in the God in Kerr, like they do in the Godnet. No, so you do, especially adventurers are going to need to go there, and they're not going to want to go there, and they need somebody who knows how to do it. So that's what the Grid Runner is all about. They
Makes
make a
sense.
great NPC, but if you're a player character who does it, you should be able to translate some of those talents into other computer networks as well around the greater Torg cosmverse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Nice. See, PK Levine asks so if occult tech is implanted like cybernetics, does that mean that every occult tech enhanced threat was intentionally created, or is there something about occult tech that means it sometimes just attaches itself onto animals?
Great question.
I think we'll leave that one alone then.
No, I mean, I was giving Leamon a chance to answer if he wanted to, but
I think
there
that
is a threat that does that, yeah.
Go ahead, Leamon.
it's both intentional, like you have surgeons who are, specifically implanting, occult tech in people or animals, but then you also do have places where just the occult tech kind of with the, I don't know, semi-intelligence of its own will infuse into something or someone.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah, there is a threat that's specifically created by fused Cultec, installing itself, or whatever you want to call it, into somebody unwillingly, and it is the end product is not nice, I guess. Yeah.
Nice. So, talking, I think about a couple of like the things that maybe could be animal companions. People mention a couple. Someone says maybe a ruck, Ruhk, from the Otorg.
I'm not familiar with that.
Those. And then Prince Earwig says, "Is the Kalinosaur still a thing?" I can't remember seeing it mentioned.
Look in Relics of Power.
All right.
Oh yes, that's Relics of Power. Creatures of Tharkold. The old Creatures of Tharkold book had mostly terrible things that you never want to see. There were these creatures. I'm trying to remember what they were called. What'd you call them? Rooks?
Yeah, Ruhk. Someone said.
Ruhk. I know there were things called Desnies, which almost looked like rabbits with human faces or something, and they were maybe not friendly, but at least neutral. Rooks, though, I'm trying to remember what they were. Yeah, it's not coming. It's not coming to me, but yeah.
Yeah, lots of stuff. Let's see. G says we need an occult tech car that is combined with human body parts. What was that?
There is something similar to that in a scene in Blood on the Blasted Lands.
Yes.
Nice.
A little bit.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I think those are all of the questions that I have. Looking over, let me go look at the Discord, see if anyone asked any questions in there. Well, it doesn't look like it. So if you guys have any questions in the chat, go ahead and throw them in there. Is there anything, Leamon and Brian, that we haven't covered that's in there that's interesting to you?
There is a little bit of politics type things going on. So you have Volkov, who basically has invaded a lot of East European countries. So you do have those countries. They have their own military. They might have been, taken out by Volkov, but they have resistant pockets and things like that fighting back. So you have that political type thing going on, not just all this nastiness from Tharkold, Cosm coming in, but you also have some established countries and citizens that are trying to fight back, freedom fighter, patriot type things going on. Mm-hmm. And since it is Tharkold, though, there's lots of gray area of, we don't want this guy coming in and taking us, so we're gonna, the end justifies the means type things going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, in a realm that's basically split into three pieces, and not democratically shared, you know what I mean? there is a lot of opportunity for back and forth and factions, deciding which faction you're going to work with and how, and each one wants something out of you. And a huge portion of Blood on the Blasted Lands deals with that as well. Gets into some political stuff and difficult choices. We love to do difficult choices in our products, in our adventures. It just makes it more interesting. And this one definitely hinges on some big decisions, and that are not going to be easy to make. Mm-hmm.
Nice. PK Levine said, I made a list of every threat from every book here, and it shows where you can find the Clinosaur. So he's got a website that he threw up there. So awesome. So that's pretty cool. And then Omar asks, oh, go ahead.
I just want to say, I personally am lobbying. I hope one day we can put this together after perhaps all the core, all the cosms are finished. Once we're done with all of them, I would personally love to see every creature that has ever been statted out in any Torg Eternity product anywhere compiled into one sort of Creatures of the Possibility Wars book or something like that. I'll be lobbying for that one for a long time.
There you go. Nice.
At least a web, like a PDF.
That'd be cool, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Omar asks, are there any threats that are strongly tied to Vril energies? VRIL?
Yes.
Yes.
Most vehicles all throughout Tharkold, but especially in the Blasted Lands, use Vril. I guess probably more like the Blasted Lands. I imagine in some of the more quote-unquote civilized areas, they might still just use good old-fashioned petroleum, but out in the Blasted Lands, Vril is the most reliable energy source, and it does show up also towards the very end. There's a threat that uses Vril to power itself as well.
And so, what is Vril?
What is Vril? You want to take that one, Leamon?
Condensed pain. It's like if you could, instead of sweat, if you could collect pain droplets off of people and then form it into a crystal, basically, that has power of pain. That's what Vril basically is.
Yeah, it's delightful.
Awesome.
And yes, you can actually pick up a Vril crystal and carry it somewhere and place it into another machine, and it'll power it, and you'll feel guilty about it the whole time. But your car will drive, I guess, And that's how come so many there are a lot of the Mad Max image of the person strapped to the front of a vehicle screaming as they drive down the freeway at breakneck speeds. That guy or woman perhaps is powering that machine with their terror, They're not just up there for a intimidation display. They're up there to give that machine some energy. So
that's fantastic. Yes. I love that.
It's so brutal.
PK Levine says, quote, gets into some political stuff equals very glad to hear that. I don't want the adventure to be just mutant fighting.
Yeah.
No, I tried to, in the parts that I wrote, I try to show some real world politics without getting into this side's right and this side's wrong. But there is a lot of that stuff going on, and you kind of have to take some of that with it, even if you don't get into specifics.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there's all kinds of stuff in this adventure. You'll see everything from just fighting marauders in a chase sequence, to having to negotiate with two different political factions who are at each other's throat. Yeah. There's also some, again, I don't want to spoil it, but there's a particularly interesting section where you have to do something you're probably not going to want to do, but it is going to benefit you quite a bit to do so.
All right. Hair Man Mode asks, are aspirants soulless like regular techno demons? Can they perform miracles and be resurrected?
Ooh. I guess I'd have to again defer that one to Daryl or somebody, but I don't think. I mean, they might be pursuing good, but I don't think that means that they. I mean, they're still a techno demon, right? Uh, I don't think they would have a soul. But then again, if somebody was playing an aspirant at my table and that character died and we were interested in some kind of resurrection, I'd let it happen. I wouldn't be like, no, it was your fault for choosing an aspirant or something. But other people might be more interested in sticking to the lore, I guess. So I guess it really depends. But I would say probably lore-wise, no. Game-wise, sure.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's about gonna wrap it up. Wrap it
Okay.
up for us. What? Let's see. Looking at these last few stretch goals that we have on here, the next one is the Tharkold Psionics, which unlocks at 120,000. After that, 130. We've got Delphi Missions Writers Roundtable, which did both of you guys write for the Delphi missions?
Yes.
Yeah. So.
I have a mission.
Okay.
Did you write for it?
I haven't written for the missions. I've done the
Okay.
Relics of Power and then the Blasted Lands.
Okay.
So.
And then the digital content for Tharkold spell cards. So those are upcoming, and then there's going to be more after that. But that's what we're looking forward to. And then the next kind of Q&A is going to be an in-depth stream overview of the source book. So that we'll probably get to probably on Monday, I think. We'll do that one, depending on who we can get to join us then. And then we're gonna have the actual play for Blood on the Blasted Lands Act 1. That's not necessarily going to be a Q&A, but that'll be its own, gameplay.
Yeah.
And so I
Yeah,
don't did we just
that was
determine who's
my
going to run that?
act.
Yeah.
I don't know who's going to run it. I would love to play in it, but I would have a serious advantage. So I think I'll just watch,
Nice.
in enjoyment. But but I will be on the panel for discussing the writers roundtable, the Delphi mission writers roundtable. I'm slated to be on that panel as well.
Great. So I think that's about it. Leamon, do you have like a Twitter or anything that where people can follow you on social media or anything like that?
I don't.
All right, no worries. Yeah.
I have Facebook, Leamon Crafton.
There you go. How about you, Brian?
I don't do the whole Twitter thing. I guess I've tried, but it's just not for me. I am on Facebook, and I have an author page, and of course my just sort of regular Facebook account. And I also have a website at brianreevesauthor.com.
Cool.
And I have it covers some of the stuff I've written, including role-playing game material.
Nice. Yeah. So check that out. And for the rest of you, we will see you. Join us in the Discord. Deanna is in the Discord quite a bit. And then there's different channels for Torg, the Dark Eye, Fading Suns, all the games that we have. So if you want to talk to us, check that out. And of course, follow us on Twitter at UlyssesInt, and then on Facebook and Instagram as well. So for Ulysses Spiel, Ulysses International, I'm Robert Adducci. Brian and Leamon, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having us, and thanks for everybody for joining us as well.
Yeah, and chat. Yeah, definitely. Thank you guys for asking your questions. And we'll see you guys around. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.